And I'm no longer here actually in any sort of official capacity, so I'm actually going to pass the gavel. Well, he's going to move here actually. And so it's been an honor serving as vice chair and chair this past 2 years. And a pleasure working with you all. As I mentioned before, Matthew's going to be, or has taken my place as staff representative for Stafford. So lucky to have someone like him on board. He's going to bring a lot of expertise and knowledge about transportation projects to the committee here. So happy about that, but it's just been really great working with you all.
Great. Thank you, Brian. We have a token of our appreciation here on your way out. Oh, great. Thanks so much for doing your time as our chair.
Awesome.
And we'll miss you a lot, but glad to have Matthew here.
This actually calls for a Kodak moment.
It really does.
Right. Sounds good. Okay.
Get everybody else in the background.
Oh, and that won't be the only picture we get either. We need one with the certificate.
Thank you.
Cannot read. Yeah. I gotta get one.
Can email this to you.
Okay, thank you, please do. Put it on my face, please. Great, thanks.
No, I completely understand.
All right,
Great.
round of applause for our chair.
Great. Well, thank you all. It's been a joy to be a part of this group and response. And I look forward to seeing what I can do as chair. And just wanted to remind everyone that I'm here as a representative of Friends of the Rappahannock. I do bring some experience in local government as a resident and a member of the Planning Commission for the city of Fredericksburg. So I'm not officially a representative of Fredericksburg, but I know a lot of what's going on in the government machine there. So I'll do my best to speak on what's going on in the city. So when it comes to Friends of the Rappahannock's mission here, I think it's so important that we build a more river-friendly community here. And in order to do that, we have to consider alternatives to continuing to build around the vehicle, the personal vehicle, as our primary means of transportation. We simply cannot keep building large parking lots, low density developments. We have to look at alternatives, and that's why I got on BPAC and why I'm excited to be part of moving us in our next phase. So thanks for letting me be part of this. Let's do a roll call. Can we?
Adam
That-
Bush, yes. Adam.
Here.
Brian Gooch.
Here.
Matthew Lehane.
Here.
Jacob Pastwick. Jamie Jackson. Chris Clark.
Here.
Craig Pennington.
Here.
Linda Cassie Lord, sorry.
Here.
Chris Collins. Lee Anderson. Deborah Fouts. Deborah Lately is online. Lynn Faust.
Here.
Jim Lynch.
Here.
Joe Bonds.
Yep.
John Summer. Stephen Littlewood.
Here.
Aaron Frank. Kevin Brown. And Chris Clark is online. And Deborah Lately. And we also have a call-in user. Would you mind, we have 2 call-in users. Do you mind saying who you are? That's cool. Yes, one's Melvin, but
Got a
they're,
tie.
yeah.
Got 'em.
Roll call has been conducted.
All right. And Jacob is here. Just wanted to point.
Oh, that's your name.
Melvin.
Was that someone on the line there?
Yeah, that was Melvin.
Okay. All right. Great. And are there any new attendees at this meeting today. I have not seen you.
Yes, I am.
Mr. Lynn,
I am.
nice to meet you. Are you here with an organization or just as a resident?
I am. No, Rob Maple was the president of Fred Trails. I'm here, president representing Fred Trails. So
Wonderful.
thank you for having me.
Welcome. on.
Great. We love Fred Trails here.
We try.
All right. Great. And then I think,
Yes, my name's Cassie Lord and I am a new employee with VDOT. So I'm here as an alternative to Linda tonight. Linda's still going to be the main person. She just couldn't make tonight, so I'm here for.
great. Thank you. All right. Oh, yes, sorry.
Alan Minlin, and although I'm not an official from any of these organizations, a member of the Fredericksburg Cyclists and a whole bunch of kayak groups.
Great. Sounds good. You sound like my type of guy. All right. We have our agenda that needs to be approved. Does anyone have any suggestions, additions, edits to our agenda? I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Uh,
All against? Great. All right. We have our November 3rd minutes.
Have you looked the vote or not?
I'm sorry, what was your name?
May not
Alan
be a
Minlin?
member.
Okay, only members can vote?
That's what I'm asking. So make sure
Yeah.
You.
you don't say anything I'm not supposed to.
All right. Thank you. We have our November 3rd meeting minutes that were distributed by Carrie. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add or amend from the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? All right. Great. Next, item 5 is public comment. Do we have any members from the public who would like to make a public comment this time?
I actually came up with a plan that probably not anybody would, but anyhow, let's tell you what the plan is.
All right.
Okay, what is a transportation system? A transportation system allows people to travel from point A to point B safely. When we plan a transportation system, this is probably integrated with the whole rather than just bicycling, but it's part. We must not lose sight that we are transporting people to their destination. Transportation system is also a major part of the tourist and recreation industries. Not only are we transporting people, but we need to not lose sight of the reasons people live or visit here. Therefore, transportation system must be balanced. What is a balanced transportation system? The balanced system includes multiple means of safe transportation for motor vehicles and non-motor. When we expand the roads, we should not overlook the newest means of transportation and the advantages that will be realized by providing a proper means to use it. I'm talking about the e-bike. Obviously regular bikes too. We need to provide bike lanes on the alternate routes that flow from east to west, any new bridges and Route 1. How will this reduce traffic, which is the main focus of this group? Not exactly. In large urban areas, the e-bike is becoming the major means of transportation. It can also become one in our counties. For every person who rides to work, there is one less vehicle on the road. Remember, we are planning for development for this transportation system for the year 2050. Most people will be looking at the alternate transportation to go to work or recreation. Yes, it will cost money, but maybe not as much as you think. What are the advantages of adding a few hundred miles of connecting bike lanes? Mainly, we have just created another local recreational activity and tourist attraction. Cycling is a large recreational activity. Families are always looking for new places to pedal. I get that confused. Share the road on roads like Enron and Truslow, for example, will only back up traffic will lead to death. Having bike lanes will eliminate the problem and keep riders safe. If we develop a large network of connecting bike trails, we will attract cyclists from all over the nation. Cycle clubs and cycle buddies seek interesting, scenic, and safe places to spend vacations. This area, with its historic past, would be fantastic for developing additional tourist attraction. Obviously, restaurants, shops, hotels would be the main beneficiaries of the increased tourists. The added taxes that they pay and the jobs they create would pay for the additional cost of the roadwork. Lastly, this area would be more desirable for locations to live, increasing home values and of course taxes. Anybody want this site track of copies?
Great. Thank you, Alan. Well said. Very well said. I read recently that more electric bicycles were sold last year than electric vehicles, which goes to show that e-bikes are really sweeping the nation. So I hope that we get behind that and provide the infrastructure in time to support that movement. It takes up a lot less space, produces a lot less stormwater to store an e-bike than it does to store a vehicle. So that's exciting to me. All right. Do we have any other comments? Carrie, did you receive any, or Coley? No. Okay, great. On to our discussion and action items. We have Paul Prideaux talking about the VCR crossing preliminary engineering review.
Great. Well, I wanted to say that I'm a big cyclist, and in a recent year, through commuting to work, I hit 850 miles for a year, and I was really proud of that because it was my best year. And my daily driver is a full EV car, so I'm trying.
Look at it. Come on.
Thank you. All right, so I know there's a camera here. I don't know if that still works, but this is a very pointy kind of presentation, so I think I'm going to stand here. So for those on the phone, I apologize. You'll hear my voice, but not see my face in this situation. So, well, thank you. I'm Paul Prideaux. I work for an engineering planning firm that is under contract to FAMPO. So they hired us to do the study that I'm going to talk about. And the study is not complete, but we're quite a ways down the road. So this group, for those of you that have been to this group before, you've heard about this before. I believe that you briefed them in the past. So, but I know there's some new faces here that haven't. So I'll try to balance focusing on new material versus kind of telling the context. So anyone here would get the maximum out of this. So we're talking about the Virginia Central Railway Crossing Study. All right, so those of you that know, there is an old rail line to trails opportunity that has been built into trail in various pieces that meanders through the community. But there are some pieces that are not rebuilt. So there's still an old rail bed, an old prism there from 100 years ago or 120 or something. But there's still a right of way, and that's huge. So the question that I was asked when we were hired is, we've got 3 at-grade crossings. We have 2 at-grade crossings. There's a US 1 crossing that I'll show you all this, and there are about 3 crossing down up here at Lafayette that are at grade. And the question put to us was, as an engineer planning firm, is it feasible to convert those to grade separated crossings? So pedestrians and bikes could get across those very busy roads in a more safe way. And then the third location, there's not an at-grade crossing, it's I-95. But that's where the old rail alignment goes under I-95. So all these pictures worth 1,000 words. But the question was, is it feasible? What would be involved? What kind of cost? The idea from FAMPO is maybe there's a smart scale application or a couple of them in the future. So that's where this is headed. So Virginia Central Crossing Study. Goal of today's meeting. So again, I told you my name, and I work for a firm called Michael Baker International. So we'll talk a little bit about the scope, just a slide or two. This is really the big important one here is review of alternative concepts, and then some next steps. So unless I hear any questions, I'm just going to keep going. So these are the 3 locations. I talked about, contrast on that's a little funky. You can't see the roadways. This is Route 3 at Lafayette. This is US 1, and this is the I-95 crossing. So it just kind of got washed out for some reason on the screen. So, but you'll see close-ups of each of those. So you'll see that map again. Okay, just a little bit about the scope of work for those of you that haven't heard this already. It's a planning study. It's not final design, engineering, construction, it's a planning study, but enough planning, kind of plan engineering is a cute word, that enough engineering to really try to get a handle on really, can you do that? Can you build it in 3 dimensions? And what kind of money are we talking about? So feasibility assessment. So up here in this first one, we looked at a number of alternatives at each of those 3 locations. We could go above, we could go under, we could do this, we could go over here. We looked at different options. That's all in the rearview mirror. We've since, and working with the policy committee and the TAC, we have limited that down. But I'll talk a little bit about where we came from. So we considered alternatives for each of those locations, and we picked kind of a preferred. And then the second goal here, the task 2, is to further develop those ideas. It really kind of open the hood and figure out some things, but not enough that you could hand it to a contractor and say, build it. That's not the level of detail. And then here we are doing some meeting and coordination. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all this, but the point is, this is a matrix that shows 3 ideas at the I-95 crossing, 2 ideas at the US 1 location, and 3 ideas out 3 crossing. So these kind of shaded locations are the ones that the policy committee and the TAC said, let's do some more investigation on those 3. So you'll be hearing about those 3 tonight. Just a little bit of what are the others? Like for example, I-95, we looked at 3 things. We looked at maybe you could go over I-95 with an aerial crossing, and those exist around the state and the country. But you have to get up to them, so it's quite a thing to get, because the earth, the lay of the land is quite below I-95 at this location. So it'd be a lot of getting up. So that was one option. The second option was a tunnel under 95. And a third option was, there's a box culvert. If you know what a box culvert is, it's made for drainage. There's this triple
Yeah, the trip.
triple box, massive box. You can walk through it. We did. We went out and walked through it and got a splashing, a little bit of water. It's we thought about, could we convert that to a pedestrian bike crossing? So converting the box culvert had too many issues. The aerial crossing wasn't popular. So what you'll hear about tonight is the idea of tunneling, excavating, not an open cut, but boring under I-95. Okay. At Route 1, there is a crossing there, and you'll see pictures in a second. I know if you may or may not recall where these are, but near Kings Mill Drive. There is an at-grade crossing there now. It's got a pedestrian feature. You press a button that stops the traffic and you walk. So it's already there now, and that's the old rail alignment, by the way. But we looked at the possibility of going over with a bridge, and we looked at the possibility of crossing under down near Hazel Run, like go down under and come back up. We threw that one out, and we're going to, tonight, we'll talk about a bridge idea. Last one, Route 3, just up here. We looked at over, and we looked at 2 overs. What was the third one? It's been a while now.
The third was quite a ways away,
Yes,
down in the
we looked
valley.
at two bridges over Route 3 and one that went below, because again, Hazel Run is throughout all 3 of these ideas. So the third option was to go parallel to 3 for a while and somehow get under where there is a Route 3 bridge. So the one that survived was over Route 3. So that's a lot of words, and no one wants words. So let's keep going. Let's talk about 95 first.
Hey, Paul, let me ask you a
Yeah,
question.
sure.
Often in these kind of studies, one of the alternatives is to leave it as is, but your instructions took that off the table.
That's a good point. That's like the no-build alternative.
Yeah.
And yeah, in a typical, like an environmental study, you always have to have the no-build. You have to carry it all the way through. This is a little bit more of a pointed, tell us what it would take. So yeah, you're right. My instructions were to go straight to that. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means study these options. So we didn't spend any time investigating. And this is really not a study about demand. It's kind of an engineering study, like a three-dimensional, can it fit? Where do you put it? How does it work? It's a little bit more of a practical, more than a value kind of question.
Okay, thanks.
So I-95. All right, this is an aerial view. This is north. This is south. So here's the old. Look at that shape right there. That's the old railroad right of way from 120 years ago, whatever it is, that used to go through here long before I-95. But there's nothing built on it right now. Now the trail is built on that railroad right of way further, about, I don't know, eighth of a mile or something up off the page here. But right now there is not any, because the interstate's there. So that's that box culvert that we walk through. Yes.
Question, and maybe Carrie, provide a little bit of context. Was that applied for a smart scale application?
Yeah, the trail leading
Yes.
all the way up to the base of
Okay, that
I-95
didn't
is
think
part of
that.
the current.
Yeah. So yeah, there is an application to get to somewhere, but it kind of has it's kind of a bridge to nowhere at this time. So this ability to have a grade separated crossing becomes very important for that smart scale app to have value. So that's the existing box culvert that we're not going to try to put people in. Just a host of issues, safety and water and drowning and low heights and everything. So, but what could be done from an engineering standpoint, it's not the first time this has ever been done, is to excavate a tunnel under the interstate. Because the interstate's built on fill right there in 1950 or 60 or whatever it was. And so the earth is much lower here. So you'll be walking into a tunnel pretty much at grade where you are standing right here. You just kind of go into it. So that is an idea that we've developed more, and I'll show you some images. So, but of course, if you do have a tunnel there, then you have to tie into something. So this one's pretty easy. A little bit of a jog here, a little first curve, and you're into this right of way. Right now, it's just trees and brush and scrubby things. So that trail would need to be built. Well, that's the
It's
application.
pretty, yeah, it's already pretty flat and graded there from the old railway, and it's not too grown up.
It's not too bad. So, the most expensive part of a trail or a road is what's under the ground. It's the subgrade, it's the riprap and the foundation. And so that's the valuable part. I mean, grubbing and clearing is not that expensive to do. So this, if you exited the tunnel here, you would need to join a trail that needed to be built. The other side is not quite as cut and dry because there's no trail near this location. So the county has a lot of ideas and hopes and dreams to get to this point, to get to this location, but that wasn't really our charge. So, we can certainly have the county chime in if but the point is, in this area, we would daylight from the tunnel, and then there would be kind of a by others, a way to continue that on, to connect to the community. Okay. So there's just a couple of some images. There are a few things we thought about from the feasibility of this. Same idea. I haven't changed ideas. It's just a different slide. What do we do? One bigger tunnel with two directional traffic, a 10-foot wide trail? Or do we do two tunnels with one direction in each tunnel? Because that makes the diameter smaller. But what we found was, and I'll show on the next slide, that one tunnel is more set. That'll be on the next slide. Some things that anyone, anywhere in the world would wonder about this is what's going on with the geotechnical quality of the soil, and are there rocks? And I mean, it's man-made, the interstate, so it's not going to be bedrock because it was filled, but still could be junk in there and roots and trunks and I don't know, buses. I don't know what they put in there in whenever it was, 1960. So geotechnical investigation we're not doing that, but that would need to be done before something could be built. The Federal Highway Administration and VDOT is going to be very concerned about Are we going to do anything? Not we. Is construction going to cause any damage to I-95? You know, last thing anyone wants on the national news is a cave-in.
Yeah.
So that's going to be, you know, certainly there'll be a lot of bonding and a lot of, for our contractors, and a lot of proof of concept. Ground movement, maintenance, security. Now, this last one is not about constructing it. It's about it once it's open. You know, you got questions about lighting, and it's a long tunnel. It's hundreds of feet long. And so, you know, you think of a little bit about personal safety. So those are all things that are legit and would need to be ultimately decided.
Is there precedent? Are there examples of things like this long and
Yeah,
tunnel?
there are. I don't have them all memorized, but there are in the country and in the world. Yes, there are. These are, yeah.
Did you end up, when you guys further investigated this, did you find out whether or not there would be a potential for daylighting in the
I
median?
think it's going to just barely. The question is, you know, the median's lower and for drainage reasons. So it's possible that if we go through here like this, and here, I'll just flip on this one. If we actually do build a tunnel, a two-way tunnel, that it might pop out and see sunshine halfway across, which is actually, I think, good. I mean, you'd have to, there are two things that VDOT will say. One is you can't have a situation where someone can climb out of there and show up on the interstate. Hi, you know, no. So there'll have to be right-of-way fencing and also drainage because the water's going to try to go there. So it'll be an engineering thing. But yes, there probably is going to be, it won't be wide open. Like maybe it'll be just at 6 feet high, you'll see the, you know, but that creates a little bit of a comfort.
The light
I
is
think-
nice.
I think
Yeah,
it
I think the
would.
light would
Yeah,
improve things
yeah.
dramatically.
Yeah, a little kind of a place to take a breath and feel like you're not in a tunnel. So this is, I'll just pretty quickly go past this. This is the idea of the two one-way tunnels side by side versus one two-way tunnels. It ends up being less total excavation if you do one two-directional tunnel. Hope I haven't been saying it wrong. Two-directional tunnel, just one of them, versus two tunnels. I just drew one here. Two tunnels, one for each direction. You end up, because you need the specs for a trail have a certain amount of kind of like shoulder and clear zone, so you don't hit things as you're riding through there. You end up paying for those shoulders twice as much. So this, you end up with a lot more cubic feet of excavation here. So this makes more sense. It's just a slightly bigger tube. So that was a pretty easy conclusion. Like I said, the tunnel by itself is only part of it. Then we have to start going that grade and pose a trail. So that's just a zoom in on the one you saw earlier. But you know, this is just straight out of a VDOT standards guidebook. So the idea is a 10-foot trail with you know, appropriate slopes, and you can't have anything like a sign or a post too close to the trail. If someone's riding or running, they need to not be injured, you know. So that it would that trail would have to be built to standards, which is very normal. And in a smart scale application, the applicant would have to say, yes, it will be built to standards. Or they'll have to tell if they're not, and it could hurt your score, you know. So you know, we even thought about the radiuses, like that curve and that curve, to make sure for the design speed that those curves are not too fast, too steep, too sharp. So, okay, that was it for that first one. And I'm happy to keep going. And then when I'm all done with the other two, have questions, unless someone's burning to ask something, I'll just kind of roll on.
Go ahead.
So this is,
I was just going to add one quick comment. There was a question about, are there other instances like this? There is a tunnel under I-81 at Harrisonburg that couples the east and west campuses, James Madison University. Has been there for a while.
I wonder if that was retrofitted. 81's been there since the 60s or something. It might have been retrofitted. Like that's the key, is to build it after the interstate as far as a parity thing. So
Yeah.
I'll investigate.
You're probably asking were the two campuses there before
I know.
sides?
Certainly they were on the west side first, but I don't know about the housing on the, so I'll investigate, in fact, Melvin's on the phone, he's my tunnel expert. So Melvin, if you're listening, let's dig into that Harrisonburg crossing and find out about it. I think that's a great feel good parity thing.
Yeah, that,
for sure.
that also gets at the security issue too,
Yeah.
because obviously on a college campus, security is paramount.
Yeah.
The plus there is, there's a lot of traffic back and forth through the tunnel, and you know how much traffic we'd have here, I'm not sure. So just have to look.
Thank
at
you. Very nice.
Yep.
Okay, so we've moved to US 1. And this is the location. Okay, so here's US 1, this Kingsville, it's actually Kingsville Drive, and it turns into Kingsville Court right about here. So that's where the trail is now. It's at grade crossing. That's the old rail bed. Look at that. There it is again. So it's a classic rails to trail. See that big horizontal curve, beautiful, great, beautiful curves. So it's there now. Tonight we could go push the button, stop the traffic and walk across, but it's at grade. So we looked at this and and the decision was made to focus on an aerial crossing. So I've got more slides about that. That's what we did. We looked at possible bridge, how the bridge might look, how long would it go? Would there be a pier in the middle? Things like that. By the way, this would be the anticipated typical section is the phrase for cutting it like a banana, you know? So you would have, again, 10 feet of clear space for travel, two directional travel, plus that shy space I talked about. So the edge of it's not right there at 10 feet, you know, you'd have somewhere. And there'd be like a fencing and notice this a little bit. You've probably seen this if you travel around. It's very important with any bridge, especially a pedestrian bridge over a highway, to not have things accidentally or purposefully fall into traffic, right? Whether someone's trying to be funny and they throw a water balloon or something more serious. So this is actually kind of a fence, you know, fencing. So that would be, the specs would probably expect that, which is no big deal. It's not a big deal for cost. I just wanted to explain what that funny shape was. So this is that intersection. Probably should have put this picture first, but here we are. So this is the crossing that's there now. So use in your mind's eye, bridge that goes up, 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 down, 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 right? Like that's the idea. So the nice thing is the land kind of rises away as you go away from the road. So that's good for an engineer. That's good because you don't want to, they call it chasing the grade, where you can never catch up if the land's falling away. So some other good news about this, when I first saw this intersection, which I've seen for a decade, but I said, oh my gosh, we got a signal, we've got overhead utilities. That bridge is going to try to compete with all of that. And how are they all going to coexist? But then we got some great news. Talking to VDOT, this signal is only there for the trail. This intersection doesn't warrant a signal except for the trail. So if we build a overpass, a bridge, we can take the signal out.
VDOT probably will like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
They're trying to get rid of signals.
They were not
That's a
right.
win-win.
They were happy to,
Yeah,
sure, just take it out.
That's great news.
Less maintenance for them. So, I mean, still there are overhead utilities that would have to be probably undergrounded for at least 200 feet or something, whatever. But that's a big deal because I remember before we learned that we could hang the signals on the bridges. Yeah, I didn't like that, and problem solved. So, okay. I've got some fun pictures in a second, but just some thoughts that go into this idea. You know, very in the weeds. It could be a pre-stressed concrete bridge or steel. This is about the span length. Signature structure, I put that in there because, you know, this could be treated like a gateway and, you know, you could have a rustified steel bridge that looks kind of brown and natural instead of industrial and military, you know? So, but that's a question mark because that doesn't come for free. So Good news is we do not expect a pier in the median, because if you put a pier in the median, then all of a sudden that lights up all these standards about protecting or not to hit the pier, and you have to whole thing. So we came up with a concept that doesn't require a pier in the median. So that's sometimes called a clear span or a clear span. Setbacks, I'll explain that in a second. Overhead utility conflicts, I mentioned that. Approach is elevated on either side, I mentioned that. And it has very little new trail construction compared to the other options at this location because you're already in that alignment. So go to this next one. So one thing that we thought about, now this is my first thing, I said to my bridge engineer who's on the phone that he's not a traffic engineer. I said, hey, if, you know, whenever you have a bridge, you have an abutment, right? Big, chunky, size of a bus kind of concrete thing, you can't see through it. So I said to Delvin, I said, we can't put the abutment somewhere where it blocks sight distance because now cars coming out of Kings Mill Drive right here won't have a signal to protect them. They need to be able to look uphill and wait for a gap. They're now a stop sign situation. So no one's going to tell them it's time to go, you're green. They're going to have to make that. So we need to make sure that this abutment set back far enough so there wouldn't be a sight triangle problem. And we did that. So some little graphic here about how much sight distance, how much space so he was very appreciative and he laid it out accordingly. So that's why this is a little, maybe you might have thought it might stop there, but you see it's a little further back for that reason. So in the weeds, more stuff about sight distance. So, you know, once we cross with the bridge, we're up in the air. So we have to get back down to grade. So you know, there are standards, maybe on previous here. You can't just dive like Snoopy straight. You need to have a certain you need to have a grade to get back that's no more than 5% for people's comfort in riding, running, walking. So it would take about this long to have a nice sloping grade, and it would just be built on fill. And and the same thing on the other side. There's also a shorter piece on the other side. Here's that trail again. I think that picture was on a previous slide. Let's see. So here's an example. That's the same graphic we saw earlier. I talked about the curved pieces, but there's an example of a clear span bridge. These are, you know, a lot of times bridges are kind of almost out of the box. You know, you order up a number 12. You know, I mean, it's not that simple, but you know, people design them and then they are built and fabricated, and you can order one and have a manufacturing company will build it to spec and bring it to the site in pieces or whatever. So there's an example of a bridge that might work, and I think that's actually kind of attractive myself, as far as not looking like a military or a industrial thing. So it happens to be a steel truss, so it could theoretically have a finish on it that is, you know, they do this iron oxide finish sometimes that looks very natural. So too far down, we wouldn't answer those types of questions at this smart scale level, but that allows the creative mind to go. Okay, that was it for that one. And here's the fun one. Yeah.
Before we head off of that one, Carrie, where is the new junior high school planned in relation to this?
No, somebody else can answer.
It's
North.
Not in the same area.
not in the same
No.
area?
So this is south of that.
So
Yeah. This
This wouldn't be much of a benefit for kids going and coming to school on either
I
side of
don't
the.
think so, no.
of the
I
pipe.
don't think the city has many kids who walk to school anyways.
Okay.
well,
Maybe it would if they could.
so one thing I was going to mention is that the city has a smart scale funding in hand to connect the VCR trail to Idlewild Park.
Yes.
Did you include that in your drawings?
They know about it though.
Yeah.
They know about it, and that's
It doesn't mean we can't. For context,
Yeah.
it's not hard to zoom out. You know, we would just need the zoomed in version for things like an application, but we could do a regional view, a bigger view.
where is the school going to be?
In Idlewild at the other end of the neighborhood.
Okay.
So it would be This would maybe create a connection for school kids to get to school.
Are school kids still allowed to walk and bike to school in Fredericksburg?
I believe so.
Because spots, they are, okay, yeah. I don't know if Spotsy allows them to walk anymore. I know they got rid of it a couple years ago. I don't know if they reenacted it.
Oh,
Yeah. What a world.
The,
it's, over there where the creek are.
the other thing with the
Wild-
Idlewild Smart Skill Trail
It's a different.
is you'd have to build a new trail up to where the end of the grade separate.
Right, that's where.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's up on.
Because the existing one comes right up to where the crosswalk is.
That's
and
something they're gonna
It's
have
gonna
to-
build a crossing signal right there at
City
Kingston.
has funding to make
So you'd have to also include either separately or as a part of whatever this turns into,
the trail.
a trail up Kingsmill Boulevard or something.
Yes.
Yeah,
So that-
just caught up with.
Yeah, so this is
Yeah,
gonna have to be
that
coordinated
was-
with that.
That, we had that.
Getting on the money then.
Yep.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
did.
Staff us to build it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
To be a switchback or something
Yes.
to get to the.
Yeah.
where it-
Yeah.
Mhm.
We did that.
Yeah, a whole bunch is going on in that area, smart scale wise, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
the connections are
Okay.
being made.
Yeah.
So hopefully by the time all these trails are built, kids will still be allowed to walk to school.
I would hope we would do whatever we can to encourage kids to ride their bikes.
Yeah.
My wife grew up in town, walked to school every day,
Sure, I mean,
all grades,
we all did.
every day.
Brian?
Thank you. Paul, I just had a question. I mean, obviously, one of the big considerations for these options is the upfront cost, right? But there's also going to be some level of maintenance costs ongoing, depending on which option you choose. So for a structure like this, do you know if it's typical for VDOT to assume maintenance responsibility since it's within the right of way, or is it usually some kind of agreement with the localities?
Definitely an agreement. Many cases, whether they be signals or bridges, in many cases where someone outside of the state owns and maintains something that's in the state right of way. So TBD,
Okay.
that would need, we have a meeting with VDOT. When is that again? It's coming up in a week, couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's like next Thursday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're gonna do the same kind of thing with them. This is not the first time they've seen this. They've been watching and, giving us the skunk eye for a year or so now. So, but they're not trying to stop us. They just are cautiously optimistic. So anyway, we're gonna meet with them and I don't know if that particular subject will come up. It's maybe a little bit of a step 7.
Yeah, sure.
But it's a valid point because that's O&M.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Let's continue.
Last
Sorry, Stephen. Yeah, it's not.
I'm not familiar with that particular staff or looking, just thinking of, when we build bridges and you have that abutment come out, but
Yeah.
on the image you had on the northwest side crossing, there is a housing area. So how far out are they going to have to go west in order to get on that trail? Because you're not going to be able to put a crosswalk at the intersection or anything else. And I don't know if there's any other developmental plans to the east of the road.
Pretty sure, here's the community.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's right about here. So it's not as far as this side, the way the land rises. I think it's pretty quick. So that idea of getting back, they would have to do this.
That would actually help them because that community doesn't actually have any pedestrian connections technically to the existing trail.
Mhm.
There's a dirt path that goes
Mhm.
to the woods. So.
Yeah. Great. Let's continue.
Okay, so last location, so get your bearings, we're here tonight, right? And so the policy committee and tech said, let's not try to go over here and cross under this bridge. Let's focus on crossing around here, aerial overhead bridge. And they said, but could you dig into it a little bit more and say, is it better to cross here or maybe here? Here or here? But the point is right under my hand. It's where they wanted to. So we threw out the idea of going way over here because it felt like it was just there were a bunch of problems. So even though this particular drawing shows one of them in a slide or so, you'll see the two options. This happens to be one option. Let me just look at what's interesting here. So it'd be a bridge over Blue Gray Parkway. it would land over here, right about here. And this is that parcel, if any of you drive around there, it's vacant right now. And I don't actually know the status of developer world, it's, when we were out there, it's vacant, it's still
Yeah.
vacant tonight, but that would require some kind of easement or proffering kind of thing, to sneak into part of their land, or maybe it's here. If this landowner is more cooperative, that can be worked out. It could be here, here. The point is we would get over here and then reconnect to the existing trail. Because, by the way, this is an existing trail. Right?
That is what was supposed to be a Royal Farms that was
Oh, I remember the
ultimately declined by city council.
Yeah. I don't know who's got there.
Yeah, right, just north of where Lee Drive hits
Drive
Lafayette.
down-
Yeah.
So, for the 5%, on this side, regardless if it's here or here, on this side, there's our friend Hazel Run again. So you have to hit the brakes pretty fast. I'm talking about engineering construction brakes, because you can't, otherwise you're in the creek. So that's why there's kind of a sharp turn there to stay on this side. The creek is like this.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
all right. Share view. So it ties back in to right here. It ties back in. So this would be new construction. Then up over and back to grade and stop.
So one thing to mention there, the planning commission right now, the Fredericksburg Planning Commission is doing a small area plan on this area of the city. And what is envisioned there is a rezoning to a mixed use that's intended to institute a form-based code so that the buildings front on the trail. So the idea is really to create a little nook of commercial activity that fronts the trail. So you're creating businesses and potentially housing that sort of dumps you right onto the VCR trail. So this, to me, is an attractive option because you're generating a little bit more kind of frontage on the trail by having that corner right there.
Yeah.
So you now have two sets of buildings. Two sets of buildings can front on the trail. So it's
Well,
kind of cool.
this is our preferred of the two. So, and I'll explain that. So this bridge has a certain length. The answer is this bridge would have to be longer. So, okay.
So all that,
Here are truly the two options.
because that's a mess.
Is awful.
So this is the same one again. This happens to be location. Let's call it A. There's no reason behind A or B or Q or 1 or 2. This is the same one we just looked at. Call it A. The other one is this. So, some pros of this is that less deviation. People are used to doing this.
Yeah.
Less deviation from what, you can see where you want to be. I want to be over there. I'm going over here, but I want to be over there. It's a little weird, but it's not that long. It's not like it's a mile, But the problem with this one is that the bridge is 25% longer or something. And the extra cost of that more than outweighs the less cost of that grade trail. And then there also is a little bit of a concern here about, you're back to that thing about piers and sight distance, and it's really a little ambitious and maybe risky to be putting a bike right on top of the intersection. If that intersection ever needs to be widened out a little bit, or a left turn lane added or something, all of a sudden you got to move the bridge. And so we kind of like getting away from it a little bit. So our preference is go ahead.
Now, I know that this part, it looks like it's mostly within existing, I assume, VDOT right of way.
Yeah.
It abuts, although the National Park Service and the battlefield, which is that property, all of that, it looks like it would go right up to that line.
Yeah.
Have you guys had any conversations with them regarding that and what they might say?
We have not. That's NPS, very,
Yeah.
they carry big sticks and they're powerful. We have not had that conversation. So that doesn't mean it can't happen. We're not done, it's just, but at this time. So, yeah, there's no doubt that was intentional. That was intentional to try to stay off those parcels.
Sure.
So, all right. That could be an example of a bridge. This would need a pier in the median. It's just because of the length. That's one example of a bridge cross-section that could serve this purpose. It probably also needs a fencing thing, you know. Multi-girder, 80-foot, that type of concept would work with 80 feet. Do it, I guess, 575 or 65 and 65 to get across. Drop here in the meet. Okay, requires easement negotiation, I said this earlier, requires easement negotiation with site development. You know, it's the first thing I said when we started talking about this alignment. Limited room for bridge abutment on the north side. I mentioned that where you have to like get off the bridge and turn pretty quick because of the run. So we're going to talk to VDOT about this in 2 weeks. So hear them say once and for all, do you think there's any plan to widen Route 3 in 20 years or something? Because, you know, if we do that, and not that they know it, I just want to hear what they say. And we might set the abutments out farther or something. So don't know what they'll say, but it's free to ask. I don't think they'll have any, we would know. We would know. You would know if there was a long range plan project, vision plan, you know.
It's not in the foundational documents of the city, for sure.
So I just want to see them squirm a little bit and see what they say. That's the same thing you've seen before on a trail, typical kind of thing. But here's a little extra thing that's different for this one. If you have a trail that's kind of built in a cornfield, you know, you can do that. But if you have a trail that's built near drop off, you're required to protect physical barriers so kids don't fall down and roll down the hill and hurt themselves. So because I told you Hazel Run on the north side is right there, you know, there probably would need to be some type of just a little extra punch list item, you know, for construction. Okay, we're done. So we'll hear any comments you have tonight or after tonight. We'll respond to your questions or comments. Technical briefing to kind of see it later. That's the one we've been talking about. It's I forget the date, but it's coming up soon. We'll do something like this with them. They've seen all this, but they haven't seen this detail. I've gone deeper since we last talked to them. And there's that question about Route 3. So where this is all going, I don't think VDOT's going to say cease and desist, never speak of alternative 2 again or whatever. I don't think they will, but because they ultimately control, right? They control smart scale and everything, so they know that. But where this is headed is this year, we're going to drive these things all the way to ground and have, if FAMPO wants us to, we'll stand up 3 applications, or maybe they say, let's just do 1 this round, the next round of smart scale next year, or maybe we do 2. I don't know. They haven't even decided that yet. As much as they want, we will stand up to 3 applications and they can decide, you know, what to do with them. That's where this is headed this year.
So when do projects need to be submitted to the smart scale for round 6? What's the due date for that?
July 2024, August 1. Do you think they're going to move the date? For a long time, it's been August 1, which means.
Yeah, it's August. It's usually August, like.
Sorry, I still didn't catch.
Pre-applications.
So pre-applications start in early 2024 and then August 1st.
The very end is like August 1st. It'll be in 2024 because it's a 2-year cycle. But what happens is you have to get months before, you have to start turning in early concepts and start getting in the queue. And so it's really more like spring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes like 18 months to really develop something.
You're looking at like a year from now when you actually need to.
It's about,
Yes, we are applying for this project.
Yes, start I agree with that.
Did you estimate how well these projects will score into the smart scale?
Haven't done that. It wasn't a request of us. You know, certainly, you know, smart scale is just a fancy way to say cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
So, you know, for trails, it gets a little squishy because, you know, the benefit is, you know, not like pollution or vehicle miles of delay, or, you know, it's a little, but it's been done all over the state and trails can work. They can work. They get accessibility points and, you know, so we haven't.
Economic development, I assume.
You get some points, probably get some points for that.
I think there was a bridge in Roanoke that did receive funding in a recent round of Smart Scale.
I would say for Route 1, as you noted, that actually has traffic system movement.
Yep.
It does.
Right over it.
It does.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to add, I'm representing Spotsylvania County, but given our discussions, Smart Scale, the regional project, as you're aware, we have Smart Scale there was a regional project looking at extending a shared use path down the Route 1 corridor from the VCR down Harrison Road. Okay, so that's along the west side, the entire run. With that hill that we're looking at, as the bridge comes down, we are going to, in order to make that connection to this bridge now, there will have to be a little loop around to catch that. So I'm just want to make sure that that connection is still considered going forward, because if we do have this north-south down Route 1 corridor, there will have to be some sort of connection off to that bridge crossing.
Yeah, we are gonna have to coordinate all that.
Yeah, good point.
This, colleges deal with this all the time, like, there's a lot of engineers and architects that go into designing very beautiful, right-of-way paths through universities, but yet, we're talking about deviation, human safety route. The
Yes,
first
they do.
2 points, no problem there, because they're fed into the crossing.
Yes.
The third option over Route 3, the further you go out, and we've looked at social behavior, they're gonna look at even if they go out, BPAC goes out, and scrubs, the city scrubs the crosswalk out of that area, people are still going to attempt to cross because it's the shortest distance unless we put some type of barrier up there, forcing the funnel to the overpass, no matter how far we go. So I mean, you look anywhere in the city where we got a nice crosswalk and you've got the dirt path that cuts off at a 45 degree angle. There's human nature to do that. And I
Great
think,
point.
yes, the option A is best economically. Option B, I think it's a little bit better to reduce the desire to deviate, but there may have to be some type of option C or modification to the crossing, or people are going to continue to try to force their own way across Route 3 at the busy intersection.
Totally agree. It's classic. I've seen it a million.
Yeah.
Wasn't there, wasn't one of the earlier concepts for an overhead crossing there on Route 3, just to pretty much go where the crosswalk is now? Just go
Yeah.
right over top of the crosswalk, wasn't that?
Years ago, yes. They did talk
Kind of
about
that.
It's
I
just,
think it was-
it kind of reminds me of, excuse me, the US 1 crossing where there's just so much conflict, signal, equipment, overhead utilities, forget
Not
about
being
it.
able to see when you're trying to turn and go uphill.
Yeah.
South.
Yeah, there were too many conflicts at the.
So you get
Is that what it was? Okay.
abutments in the chop where people make that upright. We found it to be too intrusive maybe. So we were kind of policy committee intact, didn't want to pursue it, so.
One of the options, I forget whether it was a Route 2 or a Route 3 or a Route 1, was there not a tunneling option, one of your options on those crossings?
Both of them, neither had a tunnel, 3 and 1, neither had a tunnel. Both of them had a nearby bridge that you could get under there and use it as a trail.
Okay.
You had to go, talk about going offline. You had to go down the road, cross and come back up the road.
And you just still have to bridge over Hazel Run to make that,
Yeah,
to go under the Route 3. You have to cross over Hazel Run at some point.
yes, yeah.
I've walked down underneath there. It's nice,
So, yeah.
but it's very, very different.
Yeah, the problem with using going
Also,
up
there's
an existing
nothing.
bridge, there's a reason for that.
Property.
Water under there, and there's, high water issues,
Yeah.
and do you have to have a gate that closes when the water gets up to a certain level, and you can't let the kid go in there, a lot of concerns about risk.
And the Park Service ownership is another big barrier for that one. You got to go through a quarter mile of Park Service. Talk to government staff about that. They're like,
Yeah, they
want to mess with that.
they weren't gonna have that. That was part of the problem is the
Yeah.
Park Service didn't want anything to do with it. There were flooding issues and it was a huge diversion off
Yeah.
the trail.
talk about people that say, I just want to go there.
Yeah.
You're telling me I got to go an eighth of a
Yeah,
mile down
and I've kind of changed my tune on that one too, Jim, because you lose the potential economic benefits of channeling all these people on foot and on bike through a commercial area. You don't have the potential to have these businesses fronting the trail in that little node.
That's, yeah,
I've
that's gonna be.
thought about that.
Well, thank you.
Great. I had a question about the 95 tunnel. How far west of 95 does the VCR trail extend?
West, there's nothing there now.
I think the real bid.
There are bits and pieces.
So, because
There are
I've
bits and pieces.
real bid to Harrison Road.
How far
Yeah.
is
But
it
it's all
feasible to
proper.
extend that
Yeah.
trail?
The actual paved portion in Spotsylvania County, right now it starts at Salem. Gap between I-9 and Salem Church Road. Salem Church Road all the way forward. It's actually CIP money, believe it. They're resurfacing it. If it hasn't already been done, I think it's happening next year. They're resurfacing that whole trail. I've brought this up in the past. Our number one priority for the VCR trail is trying to close that gap between Salem Church and I-95. We have approved funding tab. You're familiar with the way the VCR trail terminates right now at Salem Church Road. It literally terminates inside of Salem Church Road.
Yeah.
Not at an intersection, literally like mid-block, just dead ends
That's the
there.
library, yeah.
So after years of discussing this, and the other problem is the trail, the rail bed falls off on the other side of Salem Church Road. There's a big topo issue there. And after years of going back and forth through BPAC and talking with BPAC, the determination was made that the most advantageous crossing for that is at the signalized intersection of Salem Church Road, Harrison Road. And so fortunately, the county has a public park there at the corner, Harrison Road Park. It's actually a former landfill site, which ultimately elevated the cost of doing this, but we have funding in place to extend the VCR trail up through Harrison Road Park and then up alongside Salem Church Road to the intersection. We have a Smart Scale Round 2, I believe, project for the intersection improvements for safe crossing, pedestrian crosswalk across that intersection. Through a Wawa rezoning known Hazel Run, and it had some out parcels as well from Salem Church Harrison intersection on the east side of the intersection. Then Wawa has a proffered shared use path through private development that's going to head from that intersection down to where Harrison Road and Salem Station Boulevard come in. Then we have a gap. There's a small gap involving Twin Springs subdivision. That's a gap area that we've identified as issue. We've tried in the past. We just need to get funding on it. Harrison Road is targeted for widening. Then right beyond Twin Springs, there's a new subdivision going in called Harrison Village. And if you'll notice with that, there's a shared use path section that we're able to secure with that project. So through development, we're getting things. Through public funded projects, we're getting things. And then once we're at Harrison Village, the key is securing the right of way up inland and then back up to the old rail bed to get us to I-95. And so that's a big thing. Safety is an issue. Our sheriff's office, even myself, we discourage dead-end trails. They create situations where there's no outlets. They can create problems for sheriff's enforcement issues. And then also it kind of creates an issue where you have a dead-end trail and folks want to keep going, so they'll just blaze whatever trail they want to find the property, and then we get complaints. And that ultimately starts working against perceptions on these trails. So, I would say before we, by all means, obviously that is a very logical connection for us. I know our board supported the idea of continuing on with this concept of following the old rail bed. But we really need to secure that right of way. So there is an outlet, and then there's a trail to Harrison Road to complete that. Problem with smart scale and things of that nature is you're kind of limited on the total scope of the project. So I can't see a scenario where we say we're going to get a trail all the way from Harrison to the base and the tunnel all at once. These things have to be done incrementally and over time. But we certainly need an outlet, and I think the big question mark is how does we get from Harrison to that point? And securing that right of way is going to be crucial.
So
Absolutely. I wouldn't want to, frankly, I wouldn't want to build that tunnel until we had the outlet.
it is,
Go ahead. Do you think securing an easement for that or can be a prerequisite for the smart scale application for the tunnel itself?
Absolutely. I think that's very possible.
I know that in the past, there's been discussion about just having the VCR trail follow Harrison Road
Yep.
east and cross over 95 alongside that. You could do it as part of the widening.
So here.
Is that on the table still?
This is the other part of that. The county has historically had planned to widen Harrison Road. We've tried unsuccessfully, unfortunately. Smart scale applications, a lot of these funding sources are competitive and certain projects went out over other ones. We are trying, I think, to widen Harrison Road. From point that I talked to roughly where Harrison Village is, we have the historic railbed trail.
Mhm.
We have what we call the Virginia Central Auxiliary Trail, which follows that planned road widening and I-95 crossing with Harrison Road to Route 1, and that ties into what I was just talking about earlier about a VCR down Harrison Road shared use path.
Smart.
I think they both have value. Harrison Road gives you a lot of exposure to residential subdivisions. This follows a more historic kind of natural path and actually provides the ability to even create a loop system,
Right.
which is, so they both have value. We are definitely looking at Harrison Road as well. The road crossing, I-95 bridge is eventually gonna be widened. Harrison's identified as a 4-lane road versus what's currently there. So yes, we're on board with both of those.
Okay, great. That's awesome to know. That's good.
That's all I have.
Great. Well, that was a stimulating discussion and a good presentation. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Let's move along to our next item. This is a presentation from me. So about a year ago, Friends of the Rappahannock started working with GWRC to begin a urban heat island study and ended up partnering our two organizations to do a study of urban heat island in the GWRC PD 16 region. And this sort of same topic goes back to, one of the great issues of continuing to build around the vehicle, the personal vehicle. You want me to click through it?
You can.
Sure, yeah.
You can also tell me.
Yeah, I'll do it. Thanks. And that challenge is we are making our urban areas hotter when we build large parking lots, and there are environmental impacts and social impacts to that. So this study looked at some of those impacts. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, an urban heat island is an area with a high concentration of impervious surfaces that absorbs and traps heat. So the idea here is that in a more natural environment, you have plants and natural settings that tend to reflect more sunlight, or they absorb it and use it for energy. But places like parking lots and sidewalks tend to absorb and then sort of re-emit it, like it says right here, which raises your local temperatures.
Mhm.
And what we did was Friends of the Rappahannock worked with GWRC and also especially Mary Washington to use a combination of GIS analysis, remote sensing analysis, and field data to estimate what a typical forest versus a typical urban area has in its ambient temperature on a hot day. We worked through these steps using one of our GIS analysts, in-house at Friends of the Rappahannock, primary analyst of this study. So we did our field sampling on a hot day on July 10th. We had 37 volunteers from Friends of the Rappahannock walking around with handheld thermometers and taking data down. We had 20 different sites throughout the 5 municipalities. So here were our temperature sample sites. Most of them were in the Fredericksburg area, but we also had sites at Bowling Green, in the town of King George, and then some rural properties near Port Royal, and then another one on the King George side near the town of Dogue. So what we found is that there was quite an array of options or findings here between 23 degrees Celsius and 37 degrees, which is around 85 degrees and almost 100 degrees for that particular day. So after plugging in our field data, using that to calibrate a GIS model that we use to model land cover, this was our result here. The peak temperature was approximately 17 degrees on a typical hot day of the year, hotter than a nearby natural forest setting. And that was a good data point for us and roughly lines up with what other studies have found in urban heat island areas. So this is a pretty intriguing map to me. What you see are the hotter end of the spectrum tend to be in areas with large parking lots, major roads, large rooftops. So some of the larger heat islands we found, one of them was along the US 17 Warrenton Road corridor in Stafford County. Garrisonville in North Stafford was actually the single hottest heat island that we found. Spotsylvania Town Center, Central Park, and Celebrate Virginia South in the city and Spotsy side. And then Cosner's Corner was another, and 4 Mile Fork, both very large, intense heat islands. Outside of the 95 corridor, we found smaller heat islands at the King George Landfill and Birchwood Power Complex and Dahlgren Naval Base. Some of the larger heat sinks are places like Fort A.P. Hill and Quantico are two of our largest contiguous forests. Another one, my dad was the field sampler at the Nye River Trail in Spotsylvania County, and that was another one of the largest heat sinks. So wetlands can help absorb sunlight and heat energy and help reduce the impacts of urban heat island. So one of the GWRC staff that I presented this to a few weeks ago pointed out an interesting detail here, which is that if you look at the city of Fredericksburg, and I know it's kind of small there, the difference between the west side of the city, which is Central Park, west of 95, and downtown Fredericksburg. Downtown Fredericksburg, even though it's very dense and has a lot of economic activity and lots of cars and that sort of thing, was much cooler, was not as large of a heat island as Central Park. And I thought that was a really interesting finding of this. And there's a couple factors that might help explain why that is. One of them is that downtown Fredericksburg is older and has a lot of tree cover that's grown in over the years. And in places like Central Park and the Spotsylvania Mall, there are almost no trees. You go to those places, they're just pure pavement. So you don't have the cooling influence of tree canopy assisting to cool those places down.
Probably also, so evaporation sucks out heat. It's one of the 5 ways that. So with downtown Fredericksburg being along the Rappahannock, then the evaporation of the Rappahannock. So it should have lower temperatures.
Yeah, that probably has something to do with it too. I can see that pattern there as well. And I can come back to that map if we want to. So if you break down the temperatures into classifications, here's what our findings were. Urban heat islands, which are the more intense forms of heat islands, formed 3.38% of the land area in this area. And heat islands, which were typically non-forested but not urban, places like farms or open fields or more open suburban environments, those were typically what became classified as heat islands. Those were 23% of the land area. And then non-heat islands were normally forested areas. That was generally the land use patterns we saw. So one additional step that FOR may look at in the future is where are our heat islands relative to the streams nearby, and do the heat islands have an effect on the streams? There is a concept known as thermal pollution, and that is where you have hot water rushing off of asphalt, especially, and that can have a lot of negative effects on the biota of those streams. Hotter water cannot hold as much oxygen, and so therefore you are really stressing the fish and invertebrates that live in the streams nearby. So that's something we sort of laying the groundwork for that with this study. So in review, we found what other places have found, which is that large impervious surfaces tend to have higher temperatures, tend to find those areas being heat islands. And locally here in Fredericksburg, we're looking at as much as a 17-degree difference in temperature between intense heat islands and nearby forests. So where we're going to try to take this moving forward is in our very close water quality field, we'll potentially look at the effect of heat islands on thermal pollution, but also stepping back to how this plugs into BPAC's mission is we need to consider the wisdom of continuing to build large parking lots and low density car dependent societies, because it is affecting our health, it is affecting our environment in many ways. And over time, we would seek to, if not reduce our impervious surface, to make more efficient use of our impervious surface by increasing density and transitioning to transportation forms that better serve dense communities. And that can be things like biking and pedestrian infrastructure. There's some other things too you can do to retrofit your heat islands. One of them is increase in tree canopy. So FOR has been working with the city of Fredericksburg recently to consider an ordinance that would require up to 20% of development sites be in forest canopy. That was the General Assembly enabling ordinance that was passed in 2022. And the city's Clean and Green Commission just supported that ordinance at its last meeting earlier this week. So we are hopeful that the city is going to bring that through its planning team and it'll end up becoming an ordinance for the city. It's still sort of a weak and watered down enabling legislation. 20% still not a lot. But hopefully, if the General Assembly over time gives municipalities the ability to raise that to 30 or 40%, that could be helpful for the city in the future and potentially the other municipalities. I think Spotsylvania and Stafford County, with all the development pressure that's coming to those counties, could also benefit from an ordinance that requires some measure of tree canopy. It incentivizes conservation of existing canopy in development site planning. If a developer knows they have to have 20% in forest canopy, maybe they're more likely to conserve attractive existing trees instead of just simply wiping the site clean and then peppering in a few street trees at the end. So that in the short term is one way that FOR is trying to take this study forward and make sure it's not just a study that sits on a shelf and has a real impact.
Have you thought about most of your temperature collections during the day, the thermal pollution?
It totally is.
I mean, how much heat is actually retained?
That's a great question.
So requesting a nighttime thermal study, not just collecting ambient temperatures within your heat islands, but requesting a commercial image. University of Maryland, Washington, their geospatial or geospatial studies program. Sorry. They should be able to get access to commercial imagery of that. The next thing you may want to do is reach out to NASA and get a nighttime electro-optical over this area, because especially you're trying to impact future development of roads. I would probably go near winter solstice time, so dark earlier. Get a collection to show the light pollution and major traffic roadways and other large commercial areas where vehicles are parked, and you'll get that light pollution study or next.
That's a great suggestion.
Offset the bias of just daytime.
Mm-hmm.
It'll show that these are true heat islands and not just IR reflective or absorbent materials during the day, but how much do they actually absorb heat?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great suggestion. I'll check in with you in that direction.
Have you all looked at any sort of considerations in how development is built, certain neighborhoods that are built without any landscaping or knocking down of all the tree canopies? Have you guys looked at how certain neighborhoods and their temperatures versus other neighborhoods? Like more specific, certain types of
I'll
development?
go back to the slide where the map is. There we go. So, is there a laser pointer on this?
Yes.
Which red? All right. So one thing I found interesting is that many of the areas that are in the deepest red here are on the newer side. So a place like, there are many suburban communities recently built in this area. But if you look up at this area in South Stafford, that's an old suburban community. Those areas were like 1950s and stuff, and they've grown in over time. And that may be a reason why those sites are cooler than some of the newer communities. Yeah. And I think it might just be a factor of age. Like, I think they probably scraped those things clean back in the 50s, but it's just been so much time that those trees have gotten big and mature. So, but requiring more trees from the start means you're getting ahead of the game. And I think there's a lot of reasons why developers regrade so significantly. Stormwater regulations is not ignorant to that fact, but I wish there were something pushing back on it.
Requiring that certain amounts of landscaping and trees be planted at every new development part.
Yeah,
Stuff like
I'd also
ordinance.
like to see it be easier for developers to claim tree conservation as a stormwater BMP, which they can't really do well now. You might know better than I would, but it's more like there's just more bang for your buck to clear out the trees and build a stormwater pond in many cases. And I wonder if that's a wise thing to do.
So they do provide some value, it's just not enough value to offset their impacts they're looking to do. Because if you're a developer coming in, you're just mainly looking at maximizing number of lots, maximizing development as much as you can, because it's economics. And a lot of times it's easier to, unfortunately, to take down all those mature trees and just replant something because it makes your grading process easier, or reduces retaining walls you have to put in or something.
And to Brian's point, because of the lot maximization or the build-up maximization, oftentimes what we hear from the development community is it forces them to, we can't reasonably preserve this tiny little strip of what used to be a protected forest area. So now they leave a strip of trees that ultimately end up being wind damaged and dying, and they these things are going to die anyway, so we got to take them. I would say it's very interesting. I appreciate you presenting this. I am interested in the era at which some of these developments occurred. It seems like, some of the developments, some of these historic commercial developments, it's almost like 100% impervious. They never had trees anywhere. But I get your point about newer development. I'll tell you what's in Spotsylvania County. We're looking at our design standards manual. It was adopted in 1998. We do have tree coverage requirements, but this is the interesting part of it. The tree coverage requirement, the plantings are based on tree cover as it appears 20 years from the development.
That's what this canopy does as well.
And this is what would be very helpful, though, frankly, is some guidance on minimum calipers that might get us there sooner. What's a reasonable minimal caliper that will get us to a canopy of substance within, say, 10 years? And the reason I say that too is it really matters because we have things like transitional screening buffers. Well, those are meant to kind of screen conflicting land uses or create aesthetic value along streets. We have street buffers. Well, if you have to plant twigs at the get-go, and 20 years from now it'll look good, for the next at least 10 years, you're looking at a bunch of twigs growing up and you don't get that effect of having a tree canopy. So, from our standpoint, I mean, I'd be interested frankly in looking, if there was any insight on what a reasonable minimum for regular nursery stock, not something that you can't find, for deciduous, conifer, things like that, a minimum caliper size to get us at a quicker tree canopy. And frankly, that increased cost may also more tree preservation on site rather than clearing it. It's just a thought I have because, like I said, I acknowledge it wholeheartedly. But again, if you have 20 years of time, you can plant twigs. You have a lot of years where you don't have much cover. And then some of these other areas that were developed maybe in the 70s or 80s with almost 100% impervious, we don't really have a shot at them again unless they want to come redevelop the site. There's no hook there. They just stay as giant parking lots or what have you. But this is very interesting. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly wasn't trying to call out Spotsy.
Yeah.
No, it's on our radar issue.
Yeah.
It was interesting because I looked at these and I was kind of thinking I would love to see an overlay of what's the average age of these developments because some of these have been long established and they haven't changed in a very long time. And we do have these requirements, but they may be on that 20-year schedule. So
or if they lead them to plant high growth invasive trees.
That's
And stuff like that. So like, we're not planting 5 years. Yeah, I'll plant this bird.
That's the thing we have to worry about. I was gonna say, if they're trying to find something fast, they're gonna find like a bunch of Bradford pears or something.
well, so I guess let me say it this way. Is there any way that I don't know how far your study's going? Something that is really intelligently guided to give that kind of direction. So we don't have really trees that are maybe fast growing but very weak, and next thing you know, there's get cut down and never replaced because it becomes an enforcement nightmare as well for zoning, frankly, that we have to now keep up on all the tree health and are they meeting their coverage requirements? So yeah, I mean, that would be really helpful. Species, calipers, canopy recommendations.
Yeah, well, Fredericksburg does a pretty good job. They have a very engaged tree group. Tree Fredericksburg, which I'm sure you've heard about, is meticulous about the species that they recommend for plantings. And they've worked with the city to come up with a really good tree list that they follow. And Ann Little, if you've ever met Ann Little, Tree Fredericksburg, she sees a tree she doesn't like, she'll go to Public Works and be like, what are we doing here? So
That's great.
helping you guys with an updated tree list might be a good way.
If something came out of a study like that we can get that kind of guidance.
Sure.
That'd be very helpful.
I would love to work with you on that. I will email you.
And your data on parcel and buildings were constructed should be easily available as well in all 3 localities. I know I've gathered it in the past, so should
I don't
be
have
able to.
access to a central database like that. This is just me kind of
We can get you that if you need it, I guess that's what I'm saying.
I have Fredericksburg's, but I don't know outside of it.
Feeling there's a gap between somewhere in the 50s through the 80s where it was just asphalt and building.
Yeah.
Greenbrier Shopping Center was another one of the big heat islands in the city. And I remember that's classic kind of asphalt seas.
Stafford recently introduced a new GIS interactive map, and it includes historical imagery all the way back to 1926.
That is awesome.
It's 1926, 1953, 1960, 1980 or something. But it shows some of those developments in, Ferry Farm area of Stafford as, they're clear cut and then constructed on, and now they've overgrown in the past 50 years. So
that's exciting. If I had free time, I could just browse all weekend long. Concludes all I had to say about this. Are there any more questions about the Seed Island study?
The parking lots, I guess the rehabilitation of parking lots would be one, but new parking lots that they're putting in, the first one that comes to my mind is Wicklow. They're gonna build that park down there. Is that gonna be paved or are they gonna leave that gravel?
Great question. The one down by the river?
Yeah,
We were involved in some of the early visioning for that, and we very much recommended that they try to minimize the parking and put it away from the water. My thought is though that it's a small enough area and it's embedded in what is a really a large forest. There's a river there,
Yeah.
that there won't be as acute issues with heat island as you might see somewhere up and more exposed.
The vehicles into the river.
Certainly, that's something we're gonna watch for. Yeah, but
Where
we supported
a
that.
natural surface would be a little more than it running
Yeah.
off into the river.
Maybe they'll stick
I
with
mean,
the
just
gravel
lesser of two
paths
evils.
on there.
Yes.
I mean, you have to find a balance because we want people to be able to access the river. That
Understand.
we're creating new river stewards every time some kid goes splashing in the river. But at the same time, yeah, you don't want to love it to death.
Adam, it's interesting to note that the eastern counties here in King George and Caroline County seem to be very cool.
Mhm.
And I guess my immediate questioning here, thought is, what should we be doing with our local ordinances to keep it that way?
Well, my first thought is continue to try to prevent too much urban sprawl from coming out into your counties. You see that some of the most severe heat islands are in suburban environments, and Spotsylvania and Stafford and Fredericksburg continuing to follow smart growth principles and preserving rural places in those outer counties, I think is the way forward. Locally, you guys could certainly benefit from things like requirements to build tree canopy in as well.
Actually, a lot of our land is tree covered, I mean, we're just one
Right.
woods from one end to the other, so ordinances should encourage the keeping of that tree cover, not clearing it and trying to replant, because that's,
Right.
Yeah, we gotta find ways to incentivize that.
Mhm.
It's not, I mean, that's one piece of it too, but another thing that comes to mind is in Stafford, I don't know how it is in Spotsy or the city, but we have minimum parking requirements. We don't have maximum.
That's a great
And some
point.
localities have that.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop people from coming in and, big box retail or whatever, building for, Black Friday. And the rest of the year, it's 3/4 empty.
Mhm.
So it's,
Yeah.
you're getting around the shoot.
City Planning Commission, I held my nose and voted for a special exception last night to allow 440% of the minimum parking requirement for a restaurant that's coming in, which was actually a reduction in what was there before.
Two restaurants.
In
Silver
Caroline,
Diner.
in Caroline, if you exceed the minimum parking requirements, then any extra parking over the minimum requirements has to be in porous pavement or porous pavers,
Right.
or anything like that.
That is a great
You're not allowed to
rule.
go over the minimum parking number. If you do, it's got to be porous pavement.
That's awesome.
How'd
you
that's
pick
an idea.
that?
Been
Impressive.
there for 10 years.
That's fantastic.
And Caroline County.
I know, like, go Caroline. It's wonderful.
Okay, wow, that's great.
Yeah, so another thing that I brought up kind of angrily last night after I voted for this parking exception was a tax incentive to try to encourage and make developers think twice about large parking areas, and that is to institute a stormwater utility fee on impervious surface. Essentially, you pay per square foot of impervious surface on your property when you pay your water bill. And adding a cost to an impervious surface helps stormwater runoff, but it also addresses heat island in its own way. It's just another incentive pushing back on the desire to build big parking lots.
Sure.
Alexandria has one, and some other random municipalities around the state do. So there's precedent.
How was that received?
City doesn't really seem to like that idea so far, and haven't figured out quite why that is. I have a feeling it would piss off some influential people in the city. I just don't know quite who that would be yet. The Silvers, basically.
Yeah, that's who.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Hey, Adam, this is Aaron Frank. Just want to add a
Hey,
quick
Aaron.
comment. Nice presentation. That was really good. And I actually participated as one of the data collectors for the heat island data in the city. And, you know, as we all know, in order to get that data, it means you got to be out there at 3 p.m. on the hottest day of the year. And we did it by bicycle in the city. And that makes for a pretty hot ride. And just wanted to underscore that intersection for this group, that it really does have a pretty significant human impact on active transportation users. And within the city in particular, you know, in addition to the environmental impact, you know, we look at shaded bus stops and where non-vehicular users are going to be traveling, that really takes a physical toll. So I'm glad you brought this to this group.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, Aaron. Thanks for bringing that up. Glad you could make the meeting. All right. I think I'd like to go ahead and move us to correspondence.
You missed one.
Vice Chair first.
Did I? Oh, right. That's important. Okay. Vice Chair. Well, as I found out when I became the Vice Chair last year, Vice Chair is often the chair in waiting, so to speak. And do we do 1-year terms, Carrie? Is that right?
Yeah, the vice chair does 1-year term. It's
Okay.
kind of like a practice to see how the chair does
Right.
before they become the chair.
Yep. And you have to lead the meeting if the chair can't make it.
Mhm.
I never had to do that, so they threw me into the deep end here with the chair. Do I have any questions before we start accepting nominations? Are there any restrictions on who can be?
Any full voting member, no alternates.
Okay. Full voting member. And how many, who here is a full voting member? Just so we understand who the potential candidates are.
Are you
Yeah.
an alternate or are you?
I was just a representative.
I think he made you the member and he's the alternate.
I am.
You are a full.
Representatives are
Yes.
voting members, right?
Yeah.
He's Stafford's representative, yeah.
Yeah, so any representative.
And I know Aaron's on the line. Aaron's
Mhm.
a representative. All right, so here, I was shaking your head. I want to make Jacob. Jacob, you were before
He was before me, and then I was. before
you.
Brian.
Okay, all right.
You ready for
Well,
that?
if you've already done it once, I'm not gonna shame you into doing it again. Not saying no, though.
Whatever.
Well, do we have any nominations
I
here?
nominate Matthew.
I second the nomination.
All right.
You're already first vice chair of TAC.
It's right, pretty quick jump into leadership there. Do I have any other
I think the model is that really had good luck with Chairman Stafford. So, not to mention Caroline Frederickson.
I was gonna say, Jim, come on now. We've had lots of good chairs.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. That was a awkward compliment to Brian.
Have any other nominations? Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and call the question. All in favor of Matthew Lehane as our vice chair? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Oh, no.
Accept the nomination.
Okay, perfect.
Nominate. Who nominated him?
I did.
All right. And who? Jim
seconded.
Jim seconded it.
Yes.
Just so I know who to blame.
Well, congratulations, Matthew.
Obviously, this, a little bit of a loose group here, but I greatly appreciate those that are willing to take leadership roles. Thank you, Matthew. Adam?
Don't plan on changing jobs or moving in.
Right, yeah.
Planning in place.
Great. All right, correspondence.
So I just put this in your correspondence, so you would have it as a source of information. This is for our locality reps, folks who are getting ready to put forth various funding applications. These are just funding sources for your various projects. Just have it in your pack to peruse it at your leisure.
Very brief thought. Maybe, I'm not sure if this is something we've done in the past, maybe it'd be cool to have a guest speaker, either from FHWA or VDOT to brief / talk
That's a
about
great idea.
various funding programs that are available to them.
Already giving us good ideas. Yeah, we could do that. We have a new FHWA person, so maybe we could rope them into coming to visit us.
Eric, just a question. Do you have is there a similar kind of table out there that you're aware of for, state funding sources through like VCR and some of these other more recreational trail organizations?
I have looked up those things and pulled them into various documents I've done, but I haven't seen a specific table. I can sense.
I find the funding, all these millions of pots to be
confusing.
Confusing.
Me too.
Is it really that? I mean, it's these little tiny pots of money all over with their own application. I don't find it to be very efficient.
I know.
You can't get some of these large scale projects that we discussed done with it through those means. So it's a gripe. That's all.
That's a gripe I share with you.
Craig, did I read right in what the last session of the legislature, wasn't there work underway to create a Department of Trails?
Yes, I was going to mention that in staff reports.
State funding into the picture now.
Yeah, that's the OYPI. They're really
Yeah.
great group. Potentially a great group. It hadn't really been stood up yet. They're just hiring. There is no hiring staff now.
Yeah, so staff reports was the next thing on the agenda, and I was going to mention that. There is a new state trails office. They're hiring for 2 positions. And they're just in the last budget session of the General Assembly, they put forth about $100 million for trails, and 89 million of that is in the general fund, and 14 million of that is part of our transportation alternatives. So there is new money for trails. They were all working on how to get some of that in the next cycle. In the last cycle, it was awarded to trails that were not in our district, not for district, but we are working on trying to get some in this next.
Say that over again.
In the last cycle, in the FY 23-24 cycle, which was the last round of transportation alternatives funding, it was awarded to trails not in our district. But the next cycle is coming up, and the portal opens around May 17th. We, meaning the localities, the 5 localities, are going to be putting in applications. We're going to try to get some of that money. So I was going to talk about that a little bit more, just to remind all of you that the portal is opening in May. All 5 GWRC localities are eligible for that funding. It's 80/20 reimbursement funding. And this time around, as Matthew and I were talking about before the meeting, there is specific funding for trails this time around. So even above and beyond the normal transportation alternatives, active transportation stuff funding, there's trails funding. So actually, you guys may know more about it than I do even at this point, because if you are a locality, you're eligible to be an applicant, and we're just here to cheerlead you and help you on. So I will let you know what I find out. You let us know what you find out. But it starts in May. Your pre-applications are due July 1st, and then your full applications are due October 1st, and let FAMPO know how we can help.
This is the transportation alternatives?
Yes.
Tab, okay.
Yeah, it's the every 2 years funding cycle.
2 million available, hopefully a little bit more this year.
Yeah, it's 2 million available, and then there'll be more for trails, for specifically trail projects. So the 2 million is available for like any kind of sidewalks, any kind of bike ped infrastructure stuff. And then they have some more earmarked for trails now.
Is that a total 2 million throughout the whole state?
No, that's per district.
Per district, okay, well, even per district, then, that's,
It's usually 1, 2, 3 projects only that get selected.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money.
yeah, but it's something, you know. Okay, thank you.
I seem to remember a presentation, I don't know if it was at TAC, maybe, where there were basically state identified priority trail systems. There were like 4 of them and they tend to be out in the Shenandoah.
There's 5 of them, yeah.
Do those put all other applications at a competitive disadvantage? They scored higher because they're.
We're still trying to figure out how those were identified. I think those were identified by the State Trails Advisory Committee before the State Trails Office was even created.
Okay.
And we're gonna try to find out how those were created and when they're going to come up with more, like when they're asking. We're gonna be in touch with our CTP member and try to get some more information about that.
What does that designation mean for funding? Do they get a higher score or?
I don't think it's anything to do with transportation alternatives at all.
Okay.
I think it's a different pot of funding that they're getting because they were talking about funding that had nothing to do with TA.
The other percentage,
Yeah, it's a separate pot.
separate part. Okay. Be nice to get some of that on like VCR or East Coast Green.
Well, that's what I think. I think we need to get together as a region, decide our 1 or 2 most important trails and make sure the state knows about it.
Especially since, some of these trail systems are recognized at state level through the Virginia Outdoor Plan, DCR. So that's the one thing. It'd be nice to implement some of the Virginia Outdoor Plan, which I think does recognize the VCR and East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 2 main ones. I don't know if Dahlgren Heritage Trail, I don't know if that's part of the Virginia Outdoor Plan as well. Okay, so that's all.
Potomac Heritage Trail probably as well.
I'm not sure about the Potomac Heritage Trail. Now our railroad trail, our railroad trail, the Dahlgren Trail is a part of the Potomac Heritage Trail. But I'm not sure any other part of the Potomac Heritage Trail is captured in that outdoor plan. Should be. But that's.
Yes.
Just a question, could they have possibly, since there's state trails in the Shenandoah, could it have been part of the Shenandoah State Park or close to it, like expanded it out, so they kind of like they little favorites?
Oh, no, this specific state trail that is in that region is like the Craig Botetourt Trail. It's nowhere near Shenandoah State.
Okay.
It's much more southerly. No. That's it for me for staff reports.
Great. All right. Member reports. We go, Matthew, member.
Stafford, we are currently doing a study on Butler Road. It's looking at a whole host of improvements. We currently have a existing conditions survey out. So it's looking at multi-mill improvements, sidewalks, shared use paths, intersection improvements. Along the roadways, so there's a survey out. It's on our website, on our social media. You can just find our transportation planning page and view the page for the survey. It's just embedded right into the page. So I know Jacob and anyone else who are in and around might be interested in taking that. So
Is that part of the transportation master plan you guys are going to be doing?
not specifically part of the transportation master plan.
That's
but
started yet?
Yes,
Yeah.
the results of the Butler Road study will, whatever projects or project that is pulled out of that will be put into the transportation master plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the other thing for those unaware. Stafford County, since August, started our first ever transportation master plan. And we're well on their way for that process. We had public involvement back in November, and we'll have some more public involvement coming up this spring with a bunch of projects that we're looking at.
We'd love to hear about some opportunities for comment and maybe going to hearings, whatever it takes to.
I'll make sure to provide that to Carrie and to the group down. Definitely looking at some stuff this spring for further.
Perfect.
I'll say in the meantime, if anyone does have Stafford County related comments, feel free to forward those along. Always taking comments on that related stuff.
Awesome. All right, Craig.
I add on.
Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just want to mention we did receive a site plan for high school number 6 in Stafford County, if you all are familiar. New high school in Stafford. It's going to be located between 17 and Truslow Road, if you aren't aware already. They'll be constructing a new 2-lane road all the way from Truslow at Summer Breeze Lane down to 17 at Village Parkway. And happy to report that was able to talk them into providing a shared use path along that whole road. They're also putting in a roundabout on Truslow Road, and it looks like they'll be providing shared use path connections on at least 2 legs of that roundabout, so it'll facilitate future connections. And we have some existing shared use path on Truslow, so hopefully in the future we can get it all connected up.
That's great. All right. Thanks for the update. All right, Craig.
Only thing, Caroline, we've got a work session next week with our planning commission to update. And so that hopefully will get the Ladysmith Bike and Pedestrian plan that Carrie helped us out with last year.
Lynn, do you have Frederick? So you're the new head.
I am.
All right,
Yes.
tell us a little about yourself.
My name is Lynn Faust, and yeah, I'm the new president for Fred Trail. Rob Maple is now the treasurer, so he is close by. So we just met last Tuesday at Wegmans, and we have 2 at-large members. One of our at-large members, Tad, is coming from the Quantico Mountain Bike Organization, so he has a lot of experience with him. Prior to that, he built trails on Guantanamo Bay. So once it was okay to find out if you can build there. So we're looking forward to working with him. Another young man that we're working with is Max, and he is a student. And he is working for a degree in historic preservation. So we thought that that was very interesting. And he's going to be our point of contact with Mary Washington. We hope to do a few more events. The only thing that we have on hand right now, aside from clearing trees when winter ice hits, is we have a collaboration with the junior ROTC high schools in Spotsylvania County. So we'll have Portland one weekend, Chancellor, and then Riverbend coming out end of March, beginning of April. And we've got 2 reroutes planned for them to do. One is they're all at Mott's. Mott's is our popular trail system now, so we want to make sure that that's as safe as possible. Kind of like what the gentleman was talking about with sightlines and bridges, except at a much smaller, inexpensive scale on our budget. And we're going to try to reroute a few things to make it a little more visible. There are some places where there's heavy pedestrian area, people walking dogs, kids, runners with earbuds. And we're going to try to mitigate some problems with the entanglement of the different types of users on the trails, and that's going to happen late March.
Great. Thanks for stepping up. I know Rob's worked really hard on that organization. I'm sure he's glad to have somebody to sort of take the wheel.
Yeah, we've been there the whole time. I was the secretary, and then we were FAMPO prior to that. I was part of FAMPO. We raced together. Rob is actually my brother-in-law. I've known him for 20 years now. So he's close by if we do need him. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Great. All right. Bonds?
Just really not a whole lot for the cycling club, but other than the 22nd, they're having their annual banquet. But on a personal note, if you all recall, FAMPO has been looking at the phase 1 and 2 studies for the east-west mobility. And phase 1 identified 13 areas of high congestion. Phase 2's made recommendations in terms of addressing those areas of high congestion. And one of the areas of high congestion was Warrenton Road. And so in phase 2, the consultants suggested that one of the alternatives to that or alleviating the congestion would be putting a bridge over I-9 or putting a bridge over the the river and connecting into I-90 from I-95 via the Celebrate Virginia Parkway Road. And so the folks in Virginia, excuse me, not Virginia, but in Celebrate, got a copy of the report and have been studying the report, and there's been a lot of interest on that, a lot of concerns about a potential, all the traffic being on the parkway and so forth. And a week ago, they had a meeting on that, and they had over 150 people showed up. Tom Cohen, who was the regional board supervisor for that area, was there and gave a talk. Ian was there, Polly was there, and quite an interesting meeting, and quite a lot of concern about the potential of using the Celebrate Parkway as a way to gain access over the river and onto I-95. And so it's got a lot of people concerned. So I think we'll see a lot of comments on that in the future.
Great. Thank you. Jim?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let's see. Last time I reported on the completion of the suitability study of the Dog and Railroad Trail by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Richmond. One of the things that they concluded was that it was going to cost $23 million. And we've been scratching our heads trying to understand, where that came from. Because basically, as everybody knows, it's a very well used trail now. Everybody loves the trail. And it's, hard to imagine how you could throw $23 million at it and not change it in ways that we might not like. So we have proposed, we have through our men's group, we've kicked some ideas around. Right now we're in on taking the part of called for acquiring the trail with some minimum stuff that you need to be a state park, pipe safes, gates, things like that. Comes to about $3 million. And the other $20 million we're proposing, let's wait till it's a part of Caledon, go through a master plan process, make sure the public weigh in on what they would really like to see in terms of what's in construction and all that. So we've written letters to all of our legislators, tossing out as an idea. Like all these things, it's in the hands of the legislature. One of the challenges we have is that our local legislators, our local senator has property on the trail, lives on the trail, so he has a conflict of interest, can't take a position on it, can't support it, can't do anything. Thanks.
That's Stuart.
Yeah, great guy, but still. And our local delegate, Margaret Ransone, we think, represents her district well. So I think she understands the district. We're still working on her, so we haven't got her quite on board yet. But actually, I'll be in Richmond tomorrow, walking the halls and seeing if I can get a little more interest going. Now that COVID is over, we can walk the halls without fear.
Well, we'll look forward to hearing from you more on that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you will. Thank you so much.
All right.
Can't think of anything else going on with the trail. So one interesting thing is that the trail that we own, the railroad trail, doesn't include the last mile to 301. Different other owners own that, but the reason that the $3 million is higher than what we would ask for our part of the trail is that that's a commercial piece there. That in order to acquire that is probably going to cost more than the rest of the trail, and we really don't have an information that those owners are willing to sell for what they need. But right now they're letting us use it just on a handshake basis. So still.
No?
Thank you.
Great. Would you like to give us a VDOT update?
I don't really have much. I know, so looking at the calendar, they're gonna be, VDOT's meeting with Paul, with the Michael Baker group. That's actually scheduled for the 25th.
Yeah.
Of January. So, and that's for the going over. I mean, we already did an internal meeting on that, which we gave them the comments for. That's where they got kind of the decisions for it. And I was looking at my notes as he was talking to make sure. I'm like, yeah, no, that's exactly what we decided on. So, but yeah, that's about all I.
All right. Great. Thank you for being here.
Yep. Thank you.
How about Aaron on the phone? Still there?
Hey, nothing to report. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Just want to reemphasize that point I made earlier about the transition on that Route 1 bridge. My assumption is where they push back that bridge abutment for sight distance, they need to make sure that they can fit shared use path in that stretch as well, so we can loop around. That's the city, it's in the city, I'm just making sure mechanically this all kind of works together.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't have any major reports or Spotsylvania County right now, other than the fact that we're working on a large volume of very large frontage projects down the Route 1 corridor, generally North Roxbury Mill, Route 1 corridor, and all of those, if they're enabled, will have significant frontage improvements involving shared use paths down the Route 1 corridor. I wish Caroline County was still here right now because this also impacts the rerouting of the East Coast Greenway designation. As you know, we went through that exercise through BPAC and East Coast Greenway a couple of years back. Guinea Station Road, but talking with them again, I think they're favoring the Route 1 corridor connection or via Mud Tavern. I'm not 100% sure, but we are making progress. One of the things I could tell you was enabled was the Kalahari Water Resort in Thornburg area. That does include a frontage shared use path along a very significant piece of Route 1 there, headed towards Caroline County. So that's all I have for now.
All right. Great. Jamie. All right. Thanks. Steve.
Open shop.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Do we have any other members who I have not called on yet?
Chris Clark, King George County.
Hey, Chris.
King George County was granted a Ready, Set, Go technical assistance grant from VDOT to help non-MPO jurisdictions with TA applications. RK&K is the contractor that is working with VDOT. They are supposed to be reaching out to me soon. The project that we have presented is multimodal improvements from Madison Drive, which is Presidential Lakes, to Tinsbloom Mill Lane, which is a long stretch that's part of our trailways plan. And so hopefully we'll be able to submit a competitive TA grant this spring.
All right. Thank you. Okay. I think I don't have any major updates, but I do want to, sorry, go ahead.
Item that did slip my mind. Little Rock Church in King George County, which we are trying to route the trail around the church, got a $25,000 grant from the Community Foundation to help with. So
wow,
that's quite. So
that's awesome.
So that is awesome. Lot of hurdles left, but that's a big help.
All right. Good news.
Yes.
So not much on the FOR front right now. However, I will, as I normally do, plug an organization that I'm involved with as a resident of Fredericksburg, and that is 15-Minute Fredericksburg. We are a advocacy group, a citizen group that's involved in trying to promote bike, pedestrian, public transit, and sustainable development in the city of Fredericksburg. So if you'd like to learn more about Fred 15, come find us on the website at www.fred15.org. And I'm just in the middle of helping make a Facebook page for us, so you'll find us on Facebook soon. All right, that's all for me. Anyone else? Last word before we shut it down? I also walked, so I would expect a ride home if somebody wants to. Yeah, anyway, we'll figure that out later. Adjourn.